everyone please find your seats? Had a lot more folks show up. Last 30 seconds to get coffee. We do apologize. We've had some technical difficulties. The AV never works the way you need it to. So we apologize about that. So first of all, thank you to Dr. Bowman and Western Dakota Tech for having us this morning. We appreciate the hospitality. And then thanks to all of our legislators for being here. So I do see some county commissioners and city councilors and former legislators in the crowd. Could you please stand to be recognized? Don't be shy. Thank you. All right, thanks to our team. Couldn't do this without the volunteers, so if you would please just give the volunteers a round of applause. Thank you. All right, and then we are in the capable hands of Mr. Sean Anderson today. He's been doing this a while. He's going to moderate. So I will be around collecting questions. If possible, please have a specific question and reference a bill number. And then we will be around. We have question cards up front and out by the donuts. So please get those questions in. All right, thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Garth, and it's great to see so many people here this morning. I've lived a lot of places around the United States, and this is one of the few where you can get a chance to really, submit a question and interact with your legislators directly. We do have the opportunity this morning. We're going to get to hear from every one of our 7 legislators who is present. We're going to give them the opportunity to give about a 4-minute introduction. This Cracker Barrel is always a little bit unique because the legislative session is over. So in terms of what's going to happen on any given bill, we kind of know the answer as far as the legislature is concerned. Oh, I'm sorry. We're not. I'm a couple weeks ahead of where I should be. We'll blame it on the Hall's cough drop. So anyway, this morning what I would like to do is invite each of these folks to give a 4-minute introduction or summary of what they've seen so far this session, and we'll simply move from. Okay, we are going to start with Representative Mike Derby, and give him the opportunity to go first. Mr. Derby, thank you very much for being here. Go right ahead.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm Mike Derby, State Representative, District 34, covers West Rapid City. And the reason I'm going first today, I am speaking at former State Senator Frank Simpson's Celebration of Life this morning that starts at 10 o'clock. So I appreciate the courtesy to speak, and then I'll have to leave and get ready for that. But Frank Simpson served almost 50 years ago for basically District 34 back in the day, and he was also on appropriations. I am currently chair of House Appropriations, and this will be my 5th term that I'm currently in, and I served 3 terms previously under Governor Bill Janklow back in 97 and 02, and took a 18-year break and came back last session, and I was vice chair, and I served on appropriations 3 terms back then. So it's not my first rodeo, but it is a little bit of a wild ride, to be honest with you. So I'm going to give an update on where we're at in the process. Right now we're a little halfway through the session, but from the appropriations standpoint, we're probably only about 10% of the way through getting our work done. This week coming up is a big week for appropriations. We will be setting revenue figures for the future, and that's always a challenge because we're looking into that crystal ball like 16 months ahead, trying to make decisions. And so this week on Tuesday and Wednesday, we hear from Bureau of Finance and Management and Legislative Research Council. They each give a number, and then we in our infinite wisdom get to pick somewhere in between, above or below, but we'll have lots of good information, lots of good data, and so we should be in good shape picking that number. We're also going to start hearing Senate bills, but we will be hearing them and deferring action on the Senate Joint Committee appropriation bills. And the reason for that is we're still setting our priorities. In the House, the Senate's always a little ahead of us. There's fewer members, and we have 40% new legislators in the House, so we've got a lot of education. But we will, getting our caucus positions figured out here in the next week, asking what the caucus wants to do, and then I'll get my marching orders to move forward to work with the Senate and the governor on what those priorities are. And at the end of the day, South Dakota is one of those great states. We always have a balanced budget. It's in our Constitution. We do it every year. We fight over it. But at the end of the day, we have a balanced budget moving forward. So we're greatly looking forward to the next couple weeks. Thank you for all being here. I wish I could stay. I do enjoy this. This is a big highlight of mine, and I appreciate being here. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Derby. And just to clarify my previous complete blank of my mind, obviously the session runs January 10th through March 27th. So as Representative Derby mentioned, we are in the middle, not the end. Also, we've got Ben keeping time today. So as long as you see the green light, forge ahead. Yellow light means think about an ending, and red light is wrap it up. Next, we'll bring up Representative Dennis Krull, please, for opening remarks.
Thank you. My name is Dennis Krull. I am from District 30, which encompasses part of Rapid Valley, down to Hot Springs, Edgemont, over to Pringle, Custer, Hill City, Keystone, and back up to Rapid Valley. And when Mike was talking about those freshmen that were coming in this year, I'm one of them. I'm on appropriations with Mike and Senator Johnson, and it does keep us very busy. One of the things that we are going into, this is the 5th week of the session, and one of the things that we're dealing with right now is very exciting to me, is in front of us we have 4 proposals, 4 bills for tax cutting. And being a freshman, I can't really say for sure if this has ever happened before, but we are going to go through each one of those bills and we are going to take a look at them. And people have asked me which one I'm going for right now, which one is the best. And to tell you the truth, what I've done is I've actually written out an answer, and if you don't mind, I'm going to read that. In appropriations, we are conducting a study to explore the various options for tax cuts in our state. Our goal is to assess the potential benefits and drawbacks of each of these proposals so that we can make an informed decision. We are looking at 4 different tax cut proposals, including a reduction in property tax, a reduction in the percentage of sales tax, a removal or reduction of the sales tax on food, and a combination of above. This is a very high-level explanation of the 4 cuts that we are looking at. But I think it's really important for us as a body to consider the potential consequences of each of the proposals, as they could have significant impacts on the state's finances and economy. And we do have work groups that are a work group that is studying each one of those proposals and basically setting up the pros and cons for it. One of the challenges that we have in front of us that really makes the job that we're doing very interesting, if you think about it, we are still dealing with the 22-23 budget, because it doesn't end until the 1st of July. It ends on June 30th, and the next budget starts on the 1st of July. With that said, we've also got to start working on 24-25 budget, which starts the 1st of July. So even though we haven't finished out we call it the 23rd budget, we have to start working on the 24th budget. So when Mike says we have a lot of work ahead of us, that to me is an understatement. We have a lot of bills that we have to consider with the spending, and I look forward to going through and doing the research and finding out which one is the best for all of us concerned. And thank you. And then I forgot to thank Western Dakota Tech for having this and Elevate Rapid City, and most of all, for all of you people showing up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Representative Kroll. Next up, we'll do Representative Steve Duffy.
Thank you. A couple weeks ago when he had this, I was here and I did this before, so some of you may have heard a few things that I'll say. And I am Steve Duffy. I'm in District 32. Pardon me. That's kind of the center part of Rapid City, from West Hills up through Lakota Homes up to by the malls. So that's the area I cover. I'm a first-year legislator. Chris Johnson had this seat for 4 years, and he decided not to run again, so I threw my hat in the ring. It was a tight race. And I'm on Commerce Committee and Transportation. A little bit about me, I'm a fourth generation South Dakotan. I was born and raised in Fort Pierce, South Dakota. So we've been West River, although barely, but for about 130 years. And the reason I ran, I think, is because I was uncomfortable what's happening here in Rapid City. I've lived in this district for 41 years since I got out of college. We're getting growth, and it's growing on the fringes on the top, but the middle the part of it is not growing the way it should. That's where economies work, is when you have the 30 to 50-year-olds, the productive people who have children who funnel into the system. That's my wheelhouse. For what I've came to do, that's what I'm going to do, is try to figure out small ways that I can help people who want to stay here and their kids stay here. This is I'm South Dakotan. That's it for me. I mean, and I want South Dakotans to be able to stay here and live here. New people, you can come, you can move here if you like, but I'm not open to too much about. I want to work to have the young people who want to make a life here, and we've got great institutions like this one. We've got a great institution like South Dakota Tech. We send a lot of smart kids there. I'd like to figure out ways to have some of those kids have the option. My kids, I have 3 kids, and they've all left, and that's a very unsettling thing for me. But at this point, I'm a freshman. I almost don't know what I don't know. So I'm working hard. I'm wasting, I think, a lot of time trying to figure out what the system is and how to work around it. But I have worked on a couple of bills in commerce. So anyway, that's a little bit about me and how I look at the things. And beyond that, I'll learn as I go. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Representative Duffy. Next up, we'll bring up Representative Becky Drury for her opening remarks.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming today. I appreciate everybody showing up. My name's Becky Drury, and I serve District 32, which I call the heart of Rapid City because it runs right through the middle of our downtown. This year, I'm serving as one of the Republican majority whips. I'm chairing local government. I also serve on military and veterans affairs and state affairs. So I'm finding it a very busy time in Pierre this year, but it's very exciting too. As was mentioned, we are just over the halfway point and gearing up for Crossover Day. And what crossover day is, all the Senate bills need to be to the House side, all the House bills need to be over to the Senate side, so they don't die. So we are trying valiantly to get those bills through our committees and pass through the House or the Senate and get them to the other side. And that makes for, you know, sometimes long committee meetings, but that's okay. As was mentioned before, when I get stopped, when I come back home, it's about which tax cut do you like? And I ask, which one do you like? And that's what we should be doing. We should be asking people which ones they like. But it is going to depend on revenues and future revenues, which if we all had a crystal ball we could shake and we knew what was going to happen 5 years from now, it would make the appropriations job much easier. But we don't have that. As was mentioned before, we, on the House side, will be meeting Tuesday after session in our caucus, and we'll be determining which of these high expenditure bills we really want to go after as the Republican Party. And I think the Democrats do the very same thing. Which ones are in importance to us? Which ones do we want to push forward? Which ones could we let die? And of course, we all have our babies that are near and dear to us, so we really have to fight for those things. And then Monday, Tuesday, okay, that's Monday. Tuesday is Valentine's Day. We don't have to do anything except be pretty on Valentine's Day. And then Wednesday, we will get together and see how those revenues are coming back from appropriations and what we can really afford, what we can't afford. Will it be the entire food tax? Will it be just a portion of the sales tax? Will it be property tax? We don't know at this time. So if you have different things you prefer, let us know, because that's how we let our caucus know what's important to people. But we also have to remember, like I said, we don't have the crystal ball, what's going to happen in 3 years down the line and 5 years down the line. And the nice thing about South Dakota is you don't have to balance that budget once a year. You have to be balanced throughout the year. So you can't say, well, we're going to take a deficit in February and make it up in June. You have to balance in February every month of the year. I didn't understand that till I spoke to one of the appropriators the other day, and I said, man, I think we need to tell people that, because we talk about having a balanced budget, but when you do your budget at home, it's usually maybe once a year or once every 2 years. Maybe you adjust it, but this has to be every month. So thanks, everyone, for coming. Thank you, Western Dakota Votech, for hosting us again. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you very much, Representative Drury. And next up, we're going to bring up Senator Dave Johnson.
Well, thank you, and good morning to everybody. So, yes, I'm Dave Johnson, State Senator, District 33. I chair the Senate Military and Veterans Affairs Committee, and I am a member of the Appropriations Committee. You know, being in the legislature is difficult, but Representative Drury just mentioned that we have to be pretty on Valentine's Day, and that is by far the most difficult thing for me to do. During a legislative session, I've never been able to figure out how to do that. As I walked in this morning, there was a very peaceful, respectful protest or display as I walked in. I'm so proud of my community for the ability to present an opinion in a peaceful, professional manner. That means a lot to me. I look around the room here, I see there's some Constitutional Convention people here, that also known as the CON people, they're here. I see protesters out in front that have come into the room. I'm happy to see that. I look around, I see Western Dakota Tech, or Western Dakota College is represented. School of Mines, I've seen some of them here. I look around, I see Americans for Prosperity, that's a political action committee group. I see they're in the room. Wow. So you look around, and then if I missed something, if I missed a group that you're in, I apologize for that. I didn't get a chance to write it all down. The point, first of all, I wasn't told that I was going to speak for 4 minutes coming up here, so I had to write stuff down. But as you walk around the halls of the Capitol during the during the legislation, you hear words like, I think, from legislators, I think this, I feel like this. Or lobbyists will come up to me and they'll say, how do you feel about this? How do you expect to vote about this? And I want to point out that we need to be constantly reminded that the group of people that's out here is why we are in the legislature. Because it's not about what I think. It's about 25,000 people in my district who asked me to represent them at the last election. So I don't represent Democrats, I don't represent Republicans, I don't represent political action committees, I don't represent the moms who demand action, or the yellow shirts, or the con people. I represent South Dakotans, and I represent Americans who live in District 33. With that being said, I do want to say that there is an advocacy group here, the yellow shirts. I would like, if you don't mind, if you could stand up. This is a group from Black Hills Works. They're an advocacy group for the disabled in our community. They're called the A-Team, and these people are the Advocacy Leadership Board. And this is my favorite group, so I wanted to point them out. So the day after the election, I represent 25,000 people, and the turnout here is amazing. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I'll hang around as long as it takes to talk to each and every one of you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for remaining professional, and I'll work on that Valentine's Day pretty thing.
Thank you very much, Senator Johnson. Next up, we'll have Senator Helene Duhamel.
Good morning. Thank you so much for coming. It's wonderful to see this kind of a turnout for something like this on a Saturday. So I am the senator in District 32, which is basically downtown Rapid City. It goes south of the hospital, all the way north, and then all the way east out to the outdoor mall. So it's a brand new stretch of property. I work for the Pennington County Sheriff's Office full-time, so my lane is public safety, law enforcement, how we deal with crime, mental health, substance abuse. Those are the things I'm digging into all the time. But I think of the legislature as the big W's. I like to work on work, wages, workforce housing, and of course water. Things that really impact our lives. It seems like we debate and argue about things that are social issues that are or are not. It's debatable if they're a problem in South Dakota, but these are things that impact all our lives and our pocketbooks. So those are the things I work on, getting results for the voters, getting results for you. I think we have to finish the session with concrete things that we do for the people of South Dakota. Public safety bills, we're working on there's a whole group of people who love to say, lock them up and throw away the key. But it costs money. Public safety costs money. Incarceration costs money. And so right now, when we have money, we have to invest in our prison system, but we also have to invest in our counties and our jail system. And there have been some public safety laws that are going through, some bills. One, truth in sentencing. You want to keep an eye on that. All good intentions. Nobody likes that revolving door, but it costs money, and you have to give the counties and the state resources. And you also have to always incentivize good behavior behind bars, so people have an incentive to treat each other well, to behave, to maybe get an education and get skills so they can use them when they get out. So these are things that I worry about. At the same time, we want to deal with crime and public safety. the big things that many of us West River are trying to work on funding for one-time Rapid City Regional Airport. So very critical to our tourism economy and the standard of life for all of us. Funding for the Sanford Underground Lab, really critical right now. That is a 15-to-1 economic investment, huge return. Protecting the Black Hills National Forest. It's why many of us live here, but we have to keep it safe, and we have to make sure it's protected from fire. And then, of course, water funding. I think that's the big one. When do we think about water for West River? Well, if it wasn't yesterday, it better darn be today. And we have some unspent ARPA dollars. Those are those federal dollars that came. There's $104 million that has to be spent by December of 2026. And I'm going to shoot out there really fast and try to argue that in this state, we could use that money right now to make some really big investments for big pipelines. Sioux Falls wants another pipeline. They already have Lewis and Clark. They want a second one twice the diameter. We never even got one. It's our turn to get water from the Missouri River all the way to West Dakota, and then you have one up in the northern area. But thanks so much. Working hard for you and Pierre.
Thank you very much, Senator Duhamel. Next up, we'll have Senator Mike Dietrich.
This is risky for me to try to adjust this, but I'm going to do it. No, I'm not. Good morning. Thank you for being here. Thank you for giving us an opportunity to share what we know is going on in Pierre. And it's always really great to hear what you guys think is going on in Pierre and what you think should go on in Pierre. And through all of that, it's like the old making sausage thing. Through all of that, hopefully we come out with some public policy that is good for future generations, good for South Dakota, and results in sustainable fiscal policies. That's really kind of the bedrock of what we do in Pierre, try to make that all happen. But just to give you an idea of some of the things that are going on, workforce development, we all hear and talk a lot about workforce. We need more people working. How do we get people working? How do we help people work? And so we spent a couple of years, we passed it, the workforce housing bill, and it kind of got slow-walked by the administration as far as getting the dollars out for the infrastructure to build more housing that's affordable in all the communities that need it. And it was designed to deal with small communities, big communities, in whatever way they determined was appropriate. And all it was infrastructure, nothing above ground. That's finally in place, and so we're going, oh, good, we got workforce done. Well, no, not really. We think about workforce development as a lot of components. And I'm using this as an example of most of the problems we address. There's always more to the story. What's more than the housing? Well, childcare is huge. We've heard from lots of employers, big and small. Childcare is huge. We need to figure out what are we doing in the state that's inhibiting us from having enough childcare providers in our communities. How can we make that work better? We talk about the education system. What do we need to do in the education system? When people are moving to South Dakota, typically they'll look for a house, and then they'll look at the schools, then they'll take a look at the healthcare system, and then they look at the entertainment, and then transportation if they're the ones who want to fly down to Denver to do their shopping or something. But those are important things that we need to look at. We do, so it's not only the big projects, but it's tuition freezes. Does that help us keep kids in South Dakota? Will they stay in South Dakota? We have scholarships for kids, and if they stay in South Dakota, that's forgiven after they're here for a certain number of years and get licensed to do that profession in South Dakota. What's working and what's not? What should we get rid of? What should we add to? That's the process we look at, and that's just workforce. Other things that are going on, ag protection. See, kind of an interesting year in ag protection. So we have the carbon pipeline, a carbon gas pipeline issue going on, and they need to lay pipes 4 feet, 5 feet underground to take these carbon exhaust and send it up to a place in North Dakota for disposal. That's interesting. Most of the ag industry and the ethanol industry is highly in favor of that, but there are landowners who say, wait a minute, I don't want to do that. And so you have the public policy of the landowner rights and eminent domain and the overall policy of what's the best economic policy for South Dakota. We have the foreign ag ownership issue that's going on. How do you address it in a way that doesn't limit personal rights to sell your property, but provides them the protection we need for national security? We don't want certain countries to own land surrounding Ellsworth Air Force Base or Minot or in Montana or anywhere else. How do we do that in a way that's constitutional and it's fair to the landowner? There's some nuisance laws, bills that are in for ag and to prevent frivolous lawsuits related to nuisance. And then we move to education, the big three. What are we going to find? Right now the target for state employees, education, and healthcare is 5%. They're typically lumped in. There's a feeling that there needs to be some more. We need to bring up some things. So really it's going to be more than that because there's going to be some adjustments internally made, but we're trying to figure out consensus amongst our caucus, and then also the fiscal responsibility side of that. Election laws, those are we got a ton of bills that we're going through in there trying to make those work. So I see I'm on the red light, and I didn't even get to talk about jails, which is a huge issue in South Dakota and a large cost coming down the pike. So if you want to ask any questions, I'll be ready for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Dietrich. Now we're going to transition into our question and answer portion of the morning. Couple of ground rules. Number one, this is not a debate, either between the audience and the legislators or between the legislators. Based on the flow of questions, et cetera, I can't guarantee everyone an opportunity to respond, but we will absolutely do our best. If an audience member has a follow-up question to a question that's already asked, please work with Garth and Laura to get that submitted. And also do your best, if you can, to reference a bill number. That way we can more specifically get it to the legislator who might be on the right committee or might be involved in sponsoring that bill. Another favor I would ask is please submit questions, not comments. If there isn't a question, it won't get read. I'm not a billboard. And then in order to keep the conversation moving, I'm going to ask our legislators to keep the responses to 3 minutes, and I'm going to count on Ben to help me out with the timing there, again, with our green, yellow, red light system. And we'll more than likely limit responses to any one question to 4 legislators. So don't hesitate to look at me if this is a question you're particularly interested in, and let me know that you want to be one of those 4. So with that, we will go ahead and kick it off. A few of you mentioned workforce in your opening remarks, and that's what our first question relates to. I believe likely related to Senate Bill 172. The question is, hospitals around the Black Hills are experiencing shortages of nurses. What is being done to help address the nursing shortage?
I'll take the first shot, and anybody who can supplement, please do. We already have scholarship programs in South Dakota that cover tuition for physicians, nurses, and some of the other allied health professionals who are attending school in South Dakota. The state will subsidize their tuition if they work in the state for 4 years. I think the number is on that. And so we fund that every year. That's one way that we try to keep the pipeline open. Another way that we're trying to keep the pipeline open and open it wider is the West River Health Services Center, which is out by Wautiki. It's operated by, it's a consortium between USD and Black Hills. And Black Hills is now in control of it, but it's expanded the nursing program in West River. And so prior to that, students who came out to be nurses and they could do their clinicals here in our different facilities, independent and system facilities, get experience and understand things. But we could only have about 70 students at a time. With the expansion of that facility, we'll have over 140 in one cohort, which is one class that goes through. And so that will double the number of nurses that will come out of that program, and they'll be here in Rapid City. And a lot of them want to be here in Rapid City. They're West River people, and we learn from talking to them. You can go to Brookings, you can go to Yankton, and you can go to USD to get your degree. And a lot of them say, I don't want to do that. I have family here, I'm working here, my spouse is here. And someone just said, I don't want to live East River, I like the Black Hills. But we're creating that opportunity there. Looking at the reimbursement for Medicaid, the state sets the reimbursement rate for Medicaid with all providers, and that is about a 40% loss on the cost of providing those services. And so they look at, state is looking at, in the long term, and especially looking at long-term care, elder care, we need to take a look at how the state reimburses so that we can afford to keep those people open. There's 7 nursing homes that closed their doors in the last year in South Dakota. And how do we help reimburse at a more reasonable rate? that can help them keep those doors open, and then also pay enough for people to come and work there, because they could start out as an EMT. Another cool program that they do in Georgia that we should do in South Dakota is you can, in high school, when you're a sophomore in high school or freshman in high school, you can get licensed as a nurse medical tech, which is really basically an aid to nurses or medical providers. And you work and you get credit for it, and you can take courses, and by the time you graduate from high school, you can be a licensed LPN, a licensed practical nurse, and get a good job right away and then continue in a nursing career. That's a program I think we need to implement in South Dakota. That's some of what I know.
Well, I'm not sure if this is Senate Bill 172. I'm going to direct you to Senate Bill 25, which was brought up in the Appropriations Committee this week. It's a recruitment assistance program, RAP for short. RAP gives dollar bills to people in the medical profession who decide to get their degree and then go to a rural area and practice. And the retention rates in that program are very high. To date, 62 physicians have completed the program or are currently participating in the program in the rural areas and in the rural communities that recruited them. If they stay in that community for 3 years, they get a substantial bonus. With respect to dentists, 80% are currently participating. They're still in that rural program, and we're in that rural community that recruited them. There are 42 PAs, NPs, and NMs. Okay, that's getting a little bit tough for an engineer to understand what all that means, but NPs, nurse practitioners, I'm assuming. NM, what is that? Nurse midwife. Thank you. Well, they're hanging around too. They're participating in the RAP program. 64% of them are currently participating, still in the rural communities that recruited them. The Appropriations Committee allocated the money that was required to keep those people in the program, and it's been very effective for keeping medical, dental, nurses into our rural communities. So that's a good thing that we're doing in South Dakota.
Anyone else on the first question? Looks like we're good. Okay. So our next question is from Andrew on workforce housing. Andrew, where are you? If you mentioned you'd like to stand up and be recognized, you're welcome to do that. So, ladies and gentlemen, when you fill out your question form, there's a spot right at the top that you can say, you know, include your name and do you want to stand up while your question is read. So that's totally up to you. I'm doing that for Andrew because he checked that box. So, question is, we recently allocated $200 million for workforce housing. Has there been any discussion of a small part of that going to workforce? Our assisted living facilities are suffering from understaffing. We have a big time staffing shortage. So any discussion of some of that $200 million going to workforce itself?
We worked really hard on that bill for a couple of years. It is limited to the housing, to putting in the infrastructure for housing that's affordable for the workforce. And it's all, you know, below the ground basically, not anything above. And there's grants and loans, low interest loans, and it's a revolving fund for the loans. It's low interest and they get paid back, and then it can be redeployed. The capital can be redeployed to do more. But none of those, the answer to your question is none of the $200 million is set aside for anything besides housing.
Housing is such a need that we felt that that has to be first. You don't have a roof, you can't work here. So we wanted to start with that. But some of these extra monies that are available, this is the discussion right now. What do we need to pay people to do that kind of work we need in our long-term care for people with disabilities? How are we going to grow our workforce with scholarships, maybe with a tuition freeze? These are the conversations. Do you want to make this investment in our state right now while we have the money, or are you bent on a tax cut? Because that's exactly what it will come down to at the end. We'll have all the needs, not wants, but real needs in our state, and then we'll look at, is there any money left for a tax cut? Because if we do one of these tax cuts, especially eliminating the grocery tax, it's gone. It's not coming back. I myself think we have too many needs right now. We should fix our house, take care of our needs. If we still have this kind of money left in a couple more years, then we know it's ongoing. It's not inflation. It's not federal dollars that are still circulating in our system. I think it's a much more cautious way to proceed in the future. Thank you.
Steve Duffy, District 32. This is kind of to the point I was making earlier. Rapid City, the story's out. I mean, people are coming here, and they're coming from everywhere. And that's the growth. You know, everybody's welcome to go wherever they want. But this is what worries me about the people who live here and their kids who live here. How are they going to, I mean, if somebody comes in and takes $500,000 and buys a $250,000 house, well, that takes all of us up. We depend on property taxes, our primary apart with sales tax. I am worried about this. This $200 million is something, I wasn't in the legislature last year, but I'm absolutely convinced that whatever little good it could do, Sioux Falls and Rapid City share a third of that pot of money, and it's from the curb down. So, you know, some people say, well, it's a giveaway to contractors. I'm not smart enough to figure that out. But what I do know is we've got growth coming from out of state. We've got the Ellsworth people growing. We have to have housing. I fully agree with you that, you know, there's other that people could use more money, and I do think that appropriators are looking at how to get us in a better position for our healthcare providers, for our assisted living people. So, but housing, if you don't have housing, you know, somebody told me the other day, well, you know, I can't afford to pay for my house and my car. I said, look, unless you're willing to live in your car, you better pay for your house. But that's a hard deal. That's a hard deal to balance. You know, if you're supposed to spend 30% on your housing, that's hard to do here right now. So I'm going to push any little bit that I can do. I'll be pushing that rock uphill. Thanks.
Anyone else on that topic? Some great answers, great discussion there. We're going to shift gears a little bit with this question, and thank you for mentioning a bill number in the question so that we get that right. So House Bill 1213 will come before the Judiciary Committee this week. This bill would hold gun owners accountable for crimes committed with a gun by children or teens if that gun owner gave, sold, or loaned the firearm to the minor, or if the minor accessed the owner's unsecured or unlocked gun and then subsequently used it in the commission of a crime. In these instances, the owner of the firearm would be guilty of a Class 6 felony. We have a right to gun ownership, and most Americans agree that responsible gun ownership saves lives. House Bill 1213 makes it clear the South Dakotans insist that minors be protected from tragedy and harm that results when adults do not engage in responsible gun practices. If House Bill 1213 comes to a vote in the House, will there be support for this common sense legislation? So I'm assuming we're looking for a response from a House of Representatives.
Okay, this bill is coming before Judiciary next week, I think. And I do not sit on Judiciary. I just read it this morning because one of my constituents brought it to my attention. Because you know, if you're in local government, you read all the local government stuff. If you're in judiciary, you read all that. If you're in approach, you deal with the money. If you're in transportation, that's the bills you focus on, and you don't know what's everything that's out there. It's impossible. There's over 400 bills. But I like some of what this says. Now, I grew up out in the country, and we had guns. We never locked them up, but that was back in the day. But we just never locked them up. There was no need to. In fact, there was always one that sat by the front door in case there was a skunk that came in the yard or whatever, and some critter, unwanted critter, and we needed to get rid of them. So I would really have to look at this pretty hard and read the second part of it. I don't think the first part gives me any hiccups, but, so what if some child or some teenager takes the gun from my brother's house and it's sitting by the front door and they commission a crime with it? What is that? What's the liability back on my brother that just kept the gun there for, so you have to be careful. I think this is headed in a good direction, but you always have to be careful of unintended consequences when you pass legislation. You always have to think, well, what's the worst or what's the best that could happen with this? So you have to be just knowing that. I will try to go to judiciary and listen to the presentation on this bill, because I think it'll be some interesting discussion. But as far as me saying yes or no right now, sorry, I can't do that. Not with just reading it in the last 15 minutes.
Dennis Kroll, District 30. And just to follow up a little bit on what Representative Drury said on this, the thing about it is the way our sessions work is really interesting to me, and it has to be done that way. And that's why we have committees. And what happens is this bill will go to a committee, and the committee will hear all the proponents and opponents of the bill and all the testimonies. And then they will either vote to pass it, or there's several things that they can do. But if it gets to the body, and then what happens with the body is, when I say the body is the House floor, we will have a Republican caucus and we will discuss the bill. And even before that time, we have individual work groups that get together and take a look at this bill. And what we do is we'll actually break this bill down and say, okay, what do you like about this bill? What do you don't like about this bill, or whatever the case may be. So I can't really give you a definite answer of what I would vote on this bill. But what I can do is point out some of the things that, your owner of a firearm is guilty of a Class 6 felony if the owner knowingly gives loans or sells firearm to a minor. What does it mean by knowingly? Give us the explanation of that. So this is what we do when we take a look at these bills. We break it down. And what we want to do is we want to pass legislation that can be followed through. We don't want to have bills out there that aren't good bills. So what we'll do is we'll take a look at that, and then somebody will say, well, by knowingly, hopefully a lawyer will give us an explanation. What does knowingly mean? Knowingly, excuse me. What does that mean? So for me to come up here and to say right now, yeah, I would vote for this or I wouldn't vote for it, I can't really do that, because I would need to take some more time and to do some more investigation into it. But thank you.
As the only other person from the House, and since it was directed that way, I'll basically say a me too to what these guys said. I just read it just now. It hasn't come out of committee yet, so I don't know what the testimony looks like. Just a little bit I looked at it, it doesn't look like anything is terrible in that thing. But until like I said, until everybody speaks their mind. So that's what I think.
Great discussion. Our next question says the state has legal and social obligations to provide disabled individuals with services in the least restrictive environments. Community service providers are chronically understaffed. Does the legislature plan to address the lack of direct support professionals either through fully funding community service providers or by providing other training or incentives to protect people from abuse, neglect, and exploitation.
I don't have the paperwork with me, but we've looked at what it costs. This is all dollars and cents. What it costs to bring all these different service providers up to 90%. And then what it costs to bring them to 100%. And this is ongoing dollars. So again, when I say all this, it's choices. But do you want what feels good? And do you want that property tax reduction? Or do you want that grocery tax elimination? Or do you want to invest in these positions that we can hardly hire people to do? It's just going to be that simple when it comes down to it. Dollars and cents. People say to me, yeah, I want to give a 25% increase to teachers. I say, okay, then you've just decided there's no tax reduction because that's ongoing, and then we build on that next year. All these things cost money. Really hard decisions. If we really have a workforce shortage, which we know we do, how do we incentivize people to work? How do we keep them? Wages are part of it. Educating them, keeping them connected to our state. But this is a big dollars and cents, and right here you're getting to the very problem we face. Thank you.
Excuse me, was the question about providers?
The question was about, does the legislature plan to address the lack of direct support professionals either through fully funding community service providers or by promoting other training or incentives?
Okay, the governor's budget proposal said she wanted to bring the providers up to 90%. And so what appropriations is, we asked the LRC, which is our Legislative Research Council, to say how much it would cost to get them at 100%. And what it would cost to get them at 100% would be $30.5 million. So as Senator Duhamel said, what do we want to do? We have that $30 million to put them up to 100%, which in my position, I would say yes, let's give it to them, they deserve it. But how does that fit in the overall budget? And this is what we are going to be working on in the next, well, basically for the rest of the session to do, is to see how we can get those numbers, because it's not only the medical providers that we need to take care of, there's a lot of other people out there that need to be taken care of also. And one of the things that was mentioned is once we commit to that 35 million, that's going to be ongoing from year to year to year. That's different than one-time spending. If you have a one-time spending where you need to spend money, and we'll take, for instance, you know, like the Stanford Underground Laboratory. They need $13 million. That's one-time spending. But then if you take a look at that, that's going to turn around and multiply by 15 times. So those are the things that we need to look at. And that $30.5 million, how does that fit in our budget going forward? You know, do we need to put them at 100%? In my opinion, we do. But I can't say that. I'm only one voice out of 105 up there. But thank you.
I'm breaking the microphone. I'm going to tell you, we've got some great appropriators this year, because they are giving us a lot of good information. One of the things they handed out was this chart. On it are 17 providers, and they go from everything from assisted living down to therapeutic foster care. And it shows where they fall, if they would be 100%, 90%, or 75% funded. So out of these 17, 6 of the 17 now fall, if we gave the 5%, would fall within that 5%. So 11 do not. And it's really true what Representative Kroll said, is we need to determine, are we going to do it at 90% or 100%? Yeah, my mom lives in assisted living in Phillip. And do I want her to have the best care possible? Oh, you bet I do. But is it on everybody else's that has to pay for that? I don't know. You know, she has great care. I'm not saying she doesn't. She really does have great care. I have no complaints. But that's just some of the things you have to think of as you go down and you float through all these categories is, and you know, you have to also think, why haven't they been upgraded? You know, why are some of them falling below 75%? Is it that they've not asked? I don't know. So it's just, you get into a lot of variables with this. I don't think there's anybody that I talk to that doesn't have a heart for making these programs whole. But it's just like your kids and their allowance. You know, just because every other kid gets $10 a day, if you give your kids 8, does that mean they're not whole? Maybe the expenses are different and the ratios are different and what they capture is different. Medicaid that they redeem back is different. So lots of variables. If anybody, I'll leave this out. If anybody wants to come up and take a peek at it, sure can.
Okay, so I sit on the Senate Appropriations Committee, and I'll give you one more view on this question. And you all, I think, have heard of the idea that if you have 20 economists in a room, then you're going to have 30 different opinions on what works and what doesn't work. I mean, it's really true. I mean, it's interesting. So the governor, in her budget, proposed a 5% increase for what's called the Big Three. That's education, state employees, and the providers. So the legislature is real interested in going to 6%, in fact. And if you combine, well, the providers, if we go to 6%, that's going to be a $33.8 million increase in expense. And again, it's ongoing every single year from here on out. For the state employees, it's $27.8 million and $31.5 million for education. Total, if you total all three of those, you get $75.5 million is what the governor is requesting. And if we go to the 6%, which is what the legislature kind of would like to see, then you're going just short of $100 million. Now let's take into account that everybody wants a tax decrease. So you've got that in combination. It's a difficult decision. Everybody, you know, we're running a budget just like you do at your household. We can't print money like the feds, and we have these expenses that we have to pay for. Everybody should keep that under consideration. And then I wanted to go back to that rural recruitment just real quickly for the medical professionals that are working in our rural communities. The bill just this year to pay back those who have met the obligation of the 3 years is just shy over $1 million. And that will come up every year as well.
Great discussion and participation on that. Thank you. Our next question is from Nick Niemer. Nick, did you want to stand up? In the back there. Thank you for submitting this. So Mr. Niemer's question, he's asking if you would please speak to eminent domain issues, especially in relationship to a couple of proposed CO2 pipelines.
I was really hoping that question wouldn't come, but since I live in Central Rapid City, CO2 pipelines are not a huge issue at this point. I did not know, I really struggled to learn about this one, and I talked to people all over East River. I heard from landowners, everybody here. I bet we had 100 emails minimum from landowners. I heard from corn people, I heard from ethanol people. Ultimately, what I did is I voted to support, I can't remember, the first one is 12, I'm sorry? I can't remember, yeah, but basically what that allowed is that that a pipeline cannot, it cannot force, keep working you right up until the end, and then once ready to go to court, make you a fair deal. They have to make their best deal up front. And then if you don't accept it and you go to court anyway, if it's more than a 20% delta, you get the chance to, they will have to pay your legal fees and your costs in addition. I voted against the other one because I've talked to some corn farmers who said, look, ethanol is our business. We raise 60% of our corn goes to ethanol, and if this doesn't go through, and there again, I'm not a farmer, I don't know. This will hurt us. We'll ship our corn to Nebraska or Iowa, someplace where cleaner ethanol is sold. So I don't, carbon sequestration, everybody says that that's probably the future. The battery technology that we're looking for now is just not ready yet. And it's going to take longer than we say. Some people say California will go by 2035. There's some people say it's just not ready yet, the lithium and the cobalt and everything you need. I don't know, but what we do know is that we're going to need cleaner ethanol for a longer period of time. The fight between eminent domain and a landowner's rights is age-old, and it's not going away. I just decided, the people that I talked to said anybody in the fossil fuel business will end up sequestering carbon in one form or another. So don't take the tool. We'll negotiate fairly with this other bill. So that's what I did.
That's in the House, and I know it's controversial over there. I just thought I'd take a teaching moment in case you didn't know what the carbon gas emissions, the whole program that we're talking about. So the production of ethanol, corn, one of South Dakota's biggest products, production of ethanol products creates carbon fiber gas, or carbon. I'm kind of a hot rodder, so I think of carbon fiber in cars more often than I think of with related to corn. Carbon gases that are emitted into the air. In order to reduce those gases into the air and to with the expectation it'll influence or help with climate change issues, the federal government requires certain emissions be reduced, or there's a penalty, or if you can eliminate those emissions, there's a payment for that. So that has become monetized by companies who are willing to invest in pipelines and the infrastructure to take the carbon gas away from the ethanol place and pipe it. It would go up to North Dakota. There's a place up there that they have determined is an appropriate place to dispose of it. Through that process, the farmer gets paid, the landowner gets paid, the company that invested in the infrastructure gets paid. So it's all a monetization of a policy that relates to the emission of carbon gas into the air. The question right now is in South Dakota, it's my understanding about 96, 97%, you guys can correct me, of the landowners have agreed to the pipelines. They're 4 to 5 feet underground, which there are plenty of the different types of pipelines underground throughout South Dakota for transmission of all kinds of things, from water to electricity to this. The question is the policy question is landowner rights. If I don't want it in my land, I should be able to say I don't want it on my land. The other side of that policy debate is eminent domain, and that's where it's determined if it's in the best interest of the government serving the people to require through a condemnation procedure that those lines go through, or taking part of your land for a road, or putting a sidewalk in, whatever it may be. If that action outweighs the individual rights, as long as the individual is fairly compensated for it, the government can exercise that. So it's really a principal fight right now especially with those last 5 maybe or less % people, of what's more important to me, my property rights are, what's more important to the future of the ethanol industry in South Dakota and the economic conditions in South Dakota is the other side of that policy question. So that's what we're talking about, in case you didn't know what the carbon issue is.
I was kind of hoping Representative Dury would get up on this one, but we had quite a debate on this on the floor. And basically what it says, it's House Bill, 1133, common carrier and eminent domain was the two main things. Common carrier is transporting of goods for the consumer's well-being, which could be gas, electricity, whatever the case may be. But the thing that was the holdup on this one with the carbon dioxide is you have a company that is producing ethanol, and the byproduct is a carbon dioxide. This company wanted to build a pipeline across the state all the way up to to North Dakota and bury it underground. And so the debate was, is that for the good of everybody, or is it just for the good of one company? And so the debate went back and forth. And it was as Representative Steve said, that the emails was unbelievable, and the compassion of these people about taking their land away. So it was one of those emotional ones that really made you think, you know, what is the best? But when it came down to it, and I've always said that I am for limited government telling us what to do in our day-to-day lives. And so when I looked at it from that way, and I also looked at it from the point of what is a common carrier? Was a common carrier doing what's best for everybody, or what they were doing was best for themselves? And in my opinion, it was best for what was for that company and not for the whole state of South Dakota or the state of North Dakota. And so that's why I voted to ban carbon dioxide as a commodity that can be used for the definition of eminent domain on a common carrier. Thank you.
Great discussion. Thank you again for the great questions and great dialogue up here. Our next question comes from Catherine Fitzgerald. Catherine, you said you wanted to stand? So this question is, rural states often cannot support multiple destinations for public tax funds for schools. What is your stance on House Bill 1234, which would provide for a school voucher system at accredited non-public schools?
I just have one quick comment on this, and I'm not familiar with it. I don't sit on the education committee, but you also have to realize, you know, everybody thinks this voucher system is for those going forward, but it is, but it would also include every child that is currently in a private school right now. And we talked about it in our WIP meeting the other day, and I think that's about 70 million. Does that sound right, appropriator? The current ones, if I can find my notes, I'll go back and look for it. But so it's not just going forward. It would include all those students that are currently in private education, and then going forward. And then some of these it says, well, we're going to gradually increase it, but don't forget it includes everybody that's currently in there now. So all those people that are privately paying would now receive the public assistance as well. So there's two kind of sides to that coin.
Again, it's me, Dennis Kroll from District 30. The FY '24 numbers they have for 32 students the approximate value would be 22 million. Going forward, 5,800 students, and it'd be approximately 40 million. And in FY '26, it'd be 8,500 students, which is approximately 59.4 million. And I can speak on this from the aspect of being on the Hill City School Board for the last 8 years. Part of our funding for the Hill City, or for the whole state of South Dakota, is state aid. And that state aid is what these vouchers would be going after. And part of that is the state aid formula says you get X amount of dollars for your teachers, and then 29% on top of that. And right now, I think going forward, it is something around $56,000 or $50,000 a year. You put 29% on top of that for their benefits. And then, so that's what state aid is formulated to what we should be paying our teachers. It doesn't say you have to, it's just using that as a formula. But then on top of that, there's another 38.3% that says it's for the overhead cost. And the overhead cost is the cost that it takes to run your school, which is your administration, your paralegals, your supplies, your transportation, your food service, and everything else. So if these vouchers are taken from, for instance, the Hill City School District, if we lose, say, 100 vouchers and it goes to some other private school, we've just lost that overhead to keep up our school. And one of the drawbacks that I see of this, and I think private education, you know, as opposed to public education, they both have their places. But the thing about it is, if we're going to use public funds to fund private schools, we should both be on the same level of playing fields. A public school has to have transportation. A public school has to have food services. A public school has to have special education. And the list goes on and on. So and a lot of times our hands are tied. These are the things that we have to provide. Whereas a private school, they don't have to provide that. They don't have to provide transportation. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, is that they're just not mandated to do it. Whereas public schools are mandated to do it. Public schools have to do it. So if you've taken that funding from the public schools and given it to the private schools, the thing that's going to happen is the private schools are going to take X amount of students, and that's going to be in the private sector. What's going to happen to the public schools, they're going to take the kids that the private schools basically, you know, don't have to accept, which is your special education and your IEDs and those students. They're going to be in your public schools, but they're not going to have, the public schools are not going to have the funding to take care of them, because that funding went with the other students to the private school. I'm sorry, my time is up. Thank you.
I'm going to come at it from just a little bit of angle how I look at the thing. I look at, I think I made it clear, I look at the economy and how we grow the economy. If you don't have a good public education system, you have nothing. You simply, nobody's going to move a company here that has not a great public system, because that's the workforce. Plus, it's also their own kids. My kids all went to private school, just the way it worked out. I never spent any time in private school, and that's just the way that worked out. I never, you know, we just made a decision with our checkbook. I mean, that's just how it is. If you want to do that, that's good on you. If, you know, some kids flourish in those smaller things, some kids suffocate in those small things. But in the end, I'll push for the public system to be strong. You know, could it always be improved? Could it always be more, you know, can you hold it to account better? I think there's probably ways you bet you could improve it. But you know, they're required to do things. A lot of small private schools aren't. They, you know, they have the special education needs. They have the, you know, different requirements like Representative Kroll said. So that's how I look at it.
I'm sorry, I just can't resist myself. A postscript, an interesting sidebar to this was the Senate Bill 100. That was the Governor Stronger South Dakota Family Scholarship Fund. That was to provide $15 million fund that would be allocated to foster kids who were in the custody of the Department of Human Services or Social Services for 30 days because of abuse or neglect and ended up in a foster home. If that was the case for a foster kid, that kid was eligible, the parents were eligible, the foster parents were eligible to apply for a $4,000 voucher to cover transportation for that student to go to a private school. So it's a similar question, a little bit different on the facts. It's on the Senate side and not on the House side. And in the House Education Committee last week, they killed that bill. And so it's a long-going funding and fiscal responsibility debate going on for many years. And you know, and you've seen it go into sports, being able to participate in sports, other programs. And so this is it's kind of the new battleground. But that was defeated in the Senate as well as SB 100.
Excellent discussion. We got a lot of questions here about funding. So everyone interested in appropriations here, I hope you had your Wheaties this morning. The next one is specific to jail and prison capacity as a concern at the county level. But the question is, what is being done at the state level to invest in public safety in jails?
We spent last summer, we called it a summer study of the legislature. Representatives of the House and the Senate traveled across the state and really looked into this issue because last year we set aside $78 million for an incarceration fund. And we had the thought process that some of that money would be available to counties and jails. And there's a difference between a jail and a prison. The jail is at the county level. You have one in Pennington County. Each county has some sort of situation. But we came back for the governor's budget address, and all that money is going to the state prison system and none to jails. So we are running a bill, and again, this is where your priorities are, but if you want to be tough on crime, if you want to stop that revolving door, there's no room at the inn at either the state prison system level or at the jail. So we have a bill. We're asking for $50 million in a revolving loan and grant fund situation to allow counties to get some seed money. It costs like $70 million to build the ladies' prison out here, so that doesn't cover even one jail. But it just gives a little bit of help. A low-interest loan, if counties could access 3% loan, that would help them build and operate these facilities. And the other thing we're doing, it's called a regional jail authority, patterned after regional railroad authority. Back in the day when we were building railroads, many counties could come together and levy their property taxes, so they were just a minuscule amount because it was spread out over so many counties. Our idea is the same thinking here. Counties could come together based on their needs, their crime level, come together and levy some property taxes, not only to build, but to operate their facilities. Very expensive. Over the life of a facility, the real expense is in operating, 20% in building that facility, big dollars to build, but huge dollars to maintain and run and operate that facility. So those are two things we're going for this year in the legislature to help counties that have no resources other than property taxes. And you're all really sensitive about property taxes, and I get it, so am I. But counties have never been given the opportunity to have a sales tax, which could be very helpful. Our tourists could help pay for that. Think of during the rally, if Meade County could have a sales tax, they probably could build that high school they need and that jail they need to fix. But we have continued to say, counties, you have nothing but property taxes and fees. Thanks.
If you are a county prisoner for less than a year, you're in jail. If you are sentenced to more than a year, then you are a prisoner, and that goes into the state correction system. That's the difference between the two prisons correction systems that we have in South Dakota. Both of them are understaffed and overfilled, and there's no doubt about it. Last summer I chaired the Correctional Funding Oversight Committee Task Force to make a recommendation to the legislatures to what we should do. The prison in Sioux Falls, the men's prison, was built before South Dakota became a state. And it houses probably 250 more inmates than it really has capacity for. It's dangerous for the people who work there. It's dangerous for the prisoners there. It causes a challenge and barriers to rehabilitation programs. There's a lot of issues related to it. The state needs to fund a new men's prison facility. The cost is estimated to be close to $600 million when it's all said and done. Right now, the process is to do some design and identify appropriate land somewhere in Sioux Falls area to build that prison. So the governor's budget had about $340 million that she estimated that needed to be invested in prisons at this time. Right now, though, one of our appropriators can tell us where we might be with the appropriation for that, to acquire the land and get going with the design. But over time, it's going to take probably $500 to $600 million just to do the men's prison in South Dakota. And the cost of that, we have the rainy day fund. And again, the appropriators can tell us what the balance is. But we started that way back in probably 1989, 1990 of putting money away, a certain percentage of our revenues or our budget away for rainy days. And you'll hear it come up, we had a snowstorm, a rainy day fund, maybe we should spend it on snow removal and stuff. And the state has been pretty judicious about keeping that in place. And now we come to a spot where we need to replace a prison that was built in 1881 at a huge amount of money. So a lot of those dollars will come out of that. It won't necessarily come out of current revenues, but there will be supplemented by the current revenues that come there. So that's a big issue, and it's going to take some time. The other side of that for the state correctional system is the women's prison. And the women's prison is located in Pierre. And we have facilities throughout the state, but the high security ones are Sioux Falls men's and the women's prison in Pierre. That's overcrowded as well. The conditions are incredible. And that needs to be redone. There is an effort that will be moved. They're going to put a women's facility in Rapid City because we have the ability to provide a workforce to work there. They have a men's reduced security, and we have the workforce to handle that. We can also have the workforce to help with the other prison. They're going to invest around $60 million in Rapid City, and that's not a high security one. That is a low re-enter into society type facility. So those are two big prison and jail issues that are coming along. Helene's been deeply involved in the county jail system, and so I'm on the other side of the state.
Thank you. So, Senator Diedrich, I'll thank you not to refer any more questions to the appropriators up here. I don't have all the numbers memorized, and I can't look it up that quickly, so enough of that. Thank you. So, I do have a couple of tangents, though, on this question about prison crowding. Just Thursday, the Appropriations Committee heard from the Department of Corrections, and I find this real interesting that our county sheriff asked the state of South Dakota to sell 5 acres of property located along Creek Drive, just not far from here. They wanted to the county wanted to purchase it to expand their jail facilities. And the state of South Dakota said, from Department of Corrections said, yeah, we're okay with that, we'll sell that. It's 5 acres of property that's not being used right now and owned by the state Department of Corrections. The county said, we'd sure like to buy that because we want to expand our facilities. And it was all a go until a testifier came and said, no, not so fast. And that testifier happened to be the Secretary of the Department of Corrections from a few years back, and he stated that he worked hard, very, very hard, to get a hold of that property for the State Department of Corrections, because it's impossible, he said, to get anybody to say, yeah, it's okay if the Department of Corrections wants to buy property next to my house, I don't have a problem with that. Think about that. So this 5 acres is already owned by Department of Corrections, and this gentleman said, don't be so fast, don't be so quick to sell it to the county. So the Appropriations Committee essentially tabled or deferred the action based on his testimony. And then one other thing is, we do have a problem in South Dakota. We have crowded prisons. The Appropriations Committee toured the women's prison in Pierre a year ago, and I mean, there's standing room only. I mentioned this at the last Cracker Barrel, that the gymnasium had been turned into a barracks. So there was no gymnasium. The beds, the facilities, the storage for each prisoner was now located in the gymnasium. And in the barracks prior to the gymnasium being opened up, there was walking room inside each cell in the beds. 27 inches by 14 inches is the total allocated room to pass from your bed essentially to the hallway per prisoner. Oh, and I'm just kidding, Mike. You can throw anything you want at me. I'll try to handle it.
So we are going to stay on the topic of funding for a couple more, and then I promise we are going to switch gears. We've got questions on some other topics, but I thought while we're hammering away at the appropriators, we'd keep at it. Sorry, Senator. The next question is more specific to local items. So we've got Senate Bill 148, which is about funding for the Rapid City Airport, and Senate Bill 158, which is more general to South Dakota airports, but both those were referred to appropriations this week. Do you support the idea of using general funds to help fund airport infrastructure projects in Rapid City and across the state?
Thank you. This is my bill. I'm the airport guy and the tree guy out in the legislature. This is my bill. $15 million we're requesting from general funds. Simply put, the FAA typically will provide 90%, in other words, 9 to 1. So if we have $1 to spend of local money or state money to an airport, based on certain qualifications, the FAA will give us $9 for that matching. The Rapid City Regional Airport is decades old. It's dilapidated in a lot of areas. The baggage claim area specifically, I'm sure if you've flown in and out of Rapid City, you're aware of that. I mean, I could talk all day about this, but the bottom line is, yes, I believe that general revenue funds are perfectly appropriate to support our airports, just exactly like they're used to support our highways. It's part of the infrastructure. It's a critical part of the infrastructure for Western South Dakota because our primary source of income in the western side of the state is tourism. So yes, I believe it's appropriate.
I too think it's appropriate. We invest a lot in our highway system and our roads, but air travel is so critically important to many of us. We're very, very isolated here, but our tourism industry in particular really needs that airport. They did a lot of work on the front side. It looks really nice, but the baggage handling and the backside is a problem, and we don't have enough places to really park more airlines if we want to really get into that low-cost carrier model. So we think it's a really important thing. It would be critical to our tourism industry and our quality of life out here.
Again, the economic model is how I look at things. If you're going to move here, if you're going to move a company or expand a company here, you need infrastructure. We've got two great big broadband networks right now that they can get their internet. We've got an interstate highway system, but air service. I heard that when the B-21 arrives, they expect the traffic to pick up between Southern California, where Lockheed is based. They'll be moving more and more people here. Apart from I just think economically, you have to do what it is to grow that. We're going to grow population. We have grown, and we're going to continue to grow the next 10 years, and that's the first thing people see when they get to the state. Thanks.
I'm just going to say a me too, because I've been in that baggage claim in the backside, and it is scary. So there are some things, and you have to remember that out west, it's tourism. East side of the state, I would say it's more ag, but we are so heavily reliant on the tourism industry, and we want to make that a year-round reliance on, or year-round, so people can come here for not just to enjoy our beautiful summer weather, but also come on the shoulder seasons and come in the winter and enjoy all those things. So I'm a ditto on this.
Okay, we are going to shift gears. I do have a couple more on funding items, but I want to make sure we're getting some airtime for some of these other topics. So I've got a question here related to House Bill 1241, which would waive the fee for non-driver IDs. The question is, what is your position on House Bill 1241 that would provide free IDs to homeless South Dakotans?
Well, this issue came up to me for the first time again in appropriations, and it was actually brought by the Department of Corrections because a prisoner or an inmate upon release cannot go out and apply for a job typically without some form of state ID. And that same individual is not allowed to claim residency when they are an inmate. So that's a catch-22, isn't it? We want inmates to come out and be productive citizens, taxpayers, and yet they can't get anywhere and they can't get any jobs. They can't even apply for a job because they have no ID. It's pretty minor, frankly, for the state of South Dakota to offer, in this case specifically, a form of ID so that an inmate who's trying to make a living, trying to come back into our society, an ability to apply for a job, take a job, and begin paying taxes, paying for responsibilities. So I'm fully in support of this.
And so am I. So I am on the board of the Passages Women's Transitional Living. And that is specifically, although it's Christian-based, is set up for women that come out of the either pier or they can come from the county jail, but when they come in, they have nothing. Okay, so how do you, when you have nothing, go get a driver's license? How do you, when you have nothing, apply for a job when they want verification of who you are? How do you, when you have nothing, you know, just think of all the times you've had to pull out your driver's license or some form of ID to get anything done. Have you ever lost your wallet? Oh my gosh, did you panic attack? Because you don't have any form of ID. And that's what these women are faced with when they come out of these jail systems and prison systems. And I think it's a great way to give them a leg up at a very nominal cost.
This bill came through transportation, and I sit on that committee. And the first time it came through, I just didn't like it, and the state didn't like it. Basically, there was some sort of requirement mechanism that the state had to verify your income, and would have meant trying to get people that would start focusing on, okay, instead of doing the driver's license stuff that they normally do, they would have had to start figuring out income levels and verifying. So we killed it. And but the idea was a good idea. It just was the wrong idea for how they put it together. So the representative that brought this, she's from Sioux Falls, and she brought it back. She narrowed the scope of this thing to the point where, look, the state doesn't have to try to figure out exactly, you don't have to bring your W-2 in. You just have to prove that you're homeless, that you just simply don't have an option right now. And hopefully this thing will help you go out and get a job. And it has a 3-year sunset on it. So what we're going to do, we're going to look at it in 3 years, and we're going to say, okay, did this make sense or not? And hopefully what we see is people were able to get out, they had an ID, they were able to go get some employment and start to improve their lives. So I support it the second time.
Okay. Great discussion once again. So this will be our second to the last question. This is a question about public schools. With the number of bills regarding possible tax reductions, what safeguards are in place regarding appropriations and funding for South Dakota public schools?
Wow, that's a loaded question, but there is one safeguard. It's called the South Dakota State Constitution. The South Dakota state is responsible for educating, free public education for all citizens. That's the safeguard, and that is the only one. The legislature will decide, and the people that are out there in the yellow shirts and the red shirts and abate, by the way, I got in trouble for not mentioning abate is in the room as well. But the people that are in this room and the people that are sitting at home are the people who have to let their legislators know what they want to do with this particular issue. It's a big issue, but the legislature has every right in the world to change whatever they want, except for the fact that we are obligated to provide free public education.
Just a brief comment. Looking at the grocery tax, looking at the sales tax, and looking at a property tax, how do you impact property taxes? The property tax is a reduction of the top $100,000 of your tax assessment valuation on a residence for owner-occupied homes. They estimate that will be about a $400 a year impact to the homeowners. I'm told, and I may be wrong, maybe someone can correct me, that one does not have an impact on what the school's revenue, what the schools would receive through the property tax. And I don't know the nuances of that, but that's because we haven't got to that point. We'll be grinding through this stuff in the next week after the forecast for the revenues to the state come in. But I was told that it did not impact the school district because a lot of people are concerned about that. And so hopefully that if that's something that's feasible and something that is decided to pursue, it won't have any effect on school district. The other ones, it's like Senator Johnson indicated, the state revenues they're always up for grabs, and if we give up revenue streams to a point where it's causing deficits in other areas, then the prioritization has to occur again. And we're constantly doing the prioritization process of policy-wise and fiscal-wise. But it's my understanding the property tax one won't impact school district funding.
I think it's fair to say that all legislators prioritize a strong public education. I think we all would agree. Another reason to support tourism They come, they enjoy our area, they bring their dollars, they leave, and we don't have to educate their kids. Support tourism.
Okay, quick bomb here. So on the property tax reduction, so it's the 100% of the money goes to South Dakota residents, no tax relief to renters, out-of-state owners, or your second homes. Senator Diedrich said 400, my notes say $350 a year is what you're gonna save. But here was my question when we had one of our WIP group meetings is, okay, so we take that money out and it stays in the people's hands, that's fine. What is the guarantee that this is gonna be backfilled? There is really no guarantee that it's gonna be backfilled other than we say we're gonna do it. But what if we get, and these appropriators, I'm sure would backfill the schools and make them whole so they don't lose funding. But what if 2 years from now, because we're elected every 2 years, what if 2 years from now you get a different set of appropriators, they don't like public schools, they want it all to go to the voucher system, and they say, we're not gonna backfill you, we're not gonna make you whole. There's no safeguard in there for that. And I was talking to the vice chair of appropriations on the House side, so I'm pretty sure I'm accurate on that. So there's just, if there was a safeguard in there, I would feel more comfortable with it, but there is not one now. Other than we're gonna say we're gonna backfill it. Well, maybe 3 years from now, things will be different. Think about it.
Dennis Kroll again, District 30. House Bill 1043 is a property tax reduction. It's going to take $100,000 off of your assessed value right away. So you won't have to pay taxes on that for your general levy. But most of us forget that there are more than just the general levy for your school taxes. There's capital outlay, which is $3 million, and there's special education, which is 2 point something, and I don't know off the top of my head, I'm sorry. But that's not going to be affected by that. Those amounts, those levies are still going to be on the value that you didn't take the $100,000 off. So if you have a $300,000 property, your school tax, you're still going to pay the same amount on the $300,000 for your capital outlay and your special ed. This is only going to affect the general levy. And the thing about it is with that, and this is why we need to do a lot of research on each one of these tax cuts bills if we're going to have them go through. There's nothing in there that says that what was it, I think $70 million that we would, it would cut taxes by $70 million. It doesn't say in the bill where that $70 million is going to come from exactly. It doesn't say that. But we hear that it's going to come from the general fund. Again, if we're taking $70 million from the general fund, what are we not going to, be able to fund with that $70 million? So there's always this give and take all the time whenever you say, yes, we need a property tax reduction. And the thing that, Representative Dury said is that it's only owner occupied. It's not going to affect your ag land. It's not going to affect your commercial or what we classify as other, which is if you have a trailer house or a rental or apartment or something like that. And I'm not saying that I'm against this. All I'm saying is that we need to look at every one of these and we need to see the pluses and minuses for every one of these tax cuts that we're dealing with. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to point out again, Representative Kroll has been on the school board at Hill City for 6 or 8 years. 8 years, so he's very, very knowledgeable. I'm thankful that he sits right next to next to me in the Appropriations Committee. He's got a lot of knowledge that he spreads throughout the committee. I do want to point out something that Representative Drury said, and that is that if the appropriators do this or if the appropriators do that. Well, all that the appropriators do is estimate, consult, and then essentially advise 105 legislators on what we think is the best solution. There are 105 people who vote on that budget, 105 legislators who vote and make a choice about funding education. And then I'll go even one step further back. 59.4% was the turnout in the general election in 2022. Eligible voters, 6 out of 10 voted. So there were 4 people out of every 10 that didn't even bother to show up to the election. If you want to handle your appropriators, if you want to handle the votes that your legislators are casting, then it's time to show up to the polls and elect the people that you want to put in every 2 years. I know you hear it a lot, but if education is important to you or any of the other issues that we talked about today, it's time to show up to those polls. I don't know what else to say, except if you're not going to be there to voice your vote, then I guess you're going to get what the rest of the people have decided for you. So, thank you.
Great discussion. Came close to a grand slam there. As a veteran Cracker Barrel moderator, grand slams when everyone here fights to get up to the mic. We got close. So our last question for the day, we are coming up to the end of our time, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So it's a question about House Bill 1080, which says, with House Bill 1080 having been passed and enrolled, are there any plans at the legislative level to address any unintended consequences of the limitation of access to that care? To the care that was addressed by House Bill 1080? Any plans or to address any unintended consequences of that limitation?
Uh, 1080 is the Transgender Procedures on Minors Bill. And it's going to be watched very closely to determine if there are any unintended consequences or bad outcomes. The bill prohibits the use of hormone blockers, is that the correct term? Which psychiatrists have said is not only to do a procedure to change anatomically or to affirm an identification with a different gender, but it's also been used to temporarily stabilize someone in that situation in their family so that they can wrap their head around and get their resources together as to what's going on and what is the right process and procedure and faith, counselors, friends, whatever it is, temporarily. And so there was a lot of discussion on that. I think that's an area that will be watched to see if there's outcomes or problems related to that. The other thing that we do need to remember is in other states, those procedures are performed on people from South Dakota, and they come back home, and they need some level of aftercare. A primary care provider should be able to take care of the general health, but if there's a specialized type care they need, they won't be able to find it in South Dakota, and they're going to have to go somewhere else, or maybe even have a really bad situation. But that'll be something else that will be monitored and watched. But the overall feeling is that procedure should not be performed on a minor. An individual should be able to make that decision themselves when they are mature enough to do that. Under the law, that's 18. The psychiatrists indicate that age of maturity is more like 21, 22 for female gender and 24 to 26 for male gender, but that's all part of the discussion. There was, in the hearings, everything was disputed one way or the other, and that's why I think it's going to be watched closely, and the goal is to protect kids in South Dakota. But there also will be those watching to see if it causes harm that was not intended. So I don't know if it'll be addressed in the future or not, but it'll be on the governor's desk this week.
Okay. Well, thank you very much to the members of our audience, particularly those of you that submitted questions. We are at the end of our time. I also want to say a thank you to our legislators who showed up